Yes?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Okay, let me just move my stuff around so I can see what I need to do. So, astrology is about observation and correlation. But what we see above us in the heavens is really our own reflection. So I want to begin with some observation and correlation of the mundane world that we have just come through and are experiencing face on, really for this year and for the past couple of years. On January 6th, 2021, the nation witnessed an unprecedented attack on our rule of law as thousands of angry US citizens stormed the US Capitol. And all the indications tell us that they were incited by a delusional narcissist who abused his presidential power for his own benefit and aggrandizement. And I know that's, expressing my opinion, but I really can't see it any other way. Excuse me if I get a little bit political. He attempted to remain in office irrespective of procedures and traditions of 2.5 centuries of legal jurisprudence. And these are the issues that I want to address today. So I'm gonna, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'm gonna just, run through some visual experience here of what we have just come through, because I think that what is happening with these Pluto returns is clearly reflected in our outer world at the moment. You'll see, I use a chart, and I'll get to that in a couple of minutes, which is a year earlier. I have to, getting ahead of my story. Let me just kind of do my visual journey here first, and then we'll come back. So just last month, the Boston Globe said that the rule of law is foundational to a just society. At its core, it addresses judicial independence, access to the justice system, and other basic human and economic rights that depend on a fair system of laws, enforcement, and a government that is accountable to its citizens. It ensures that government is less subject to corrupting influences and more devoted to providing peace, public safety, and security. When the rule of law breaks down, government leaders operate for their own economic benefit or enhance their power, and governmental decisions are made behind closed doors without any public accountability. Without trust in the rule of law, a significant population will believe that the justice system is stacked against them, favoring the power of the connected. And I love this quote from Justice, make this a little bigger here, I can't read it. I love this quote from Sotomayor. She says, "I firmly believe in the rule of law as the foundation of all basic rights." So, this is what our country, the principles that our country was founded on. These are the concepts and ideas that supposedly are driving us forward in the world, and they're all unfortunately under attack. For most of the 20th century, public opinion has been manipulated by the media. And it's been driven by profit motive and corporate interests. So are we surprised that we see Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and these social media, moving in to fill, some of the gaps or to take advantage of this entire area of manipulation of public beliefs and ideas that has become apparent to us? Fox News is owned by an Australian oligarch, and it's not news. It's strictly right-wing opinion and propaganda. In 1985, the Reagan administration revoked the Fairness Doctrine, which required broadcasters to provide equal access to the airwaves. to all legally qualified for a given political office during election campaigns. Since the days of Nazi Germany, and I thank you, Chad, for bringing in fascism, because I think it's an important part of this. I actually considered it as the anchor to my talk, but I kind of took a higher road and decided to talk about the rule of law and not dwell on fascism, but it's here. Since that time, authoritarian regimes have known how to drive public opinion by controlling the collective narrative. And the problem is that those who listen to Fox News really believe it. Okay, they think it's the news. It's Fox News. This must be real. The Washington Post said that Fox News was Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes' attempt to shift the national conversation and muddy the waters of discourse in the nation. And it has been successful beyond their wildest dreams. By the time of the Trump administration, the network had moved on to full-blown propaganda and not only served as a mouthpiece for Fox News, but often set Trump's agenda. That's from Variety. Variety used to be a Hollywood, a spokesperson, but obviously they've taken a political slant. When future historians seek to explain the United States' perilous slide into authoritarianism in the 21st century, they will grapple with the role played in all of these events by Fox News and right-wing media. And there was a really fabulous article in Mother Jones. I don't know if any of you guys read it or subscribe to it, but they said Fox News is cloaked in the trappings of news. Donald Trump is not the cause for the Republican Party's descent into madness. He's merely the result of decades of evolution that started when Jerry Falwell founded the Moral Majority, Rush Limbaugh picked up a microphone, and Newt Gingrich reinvented modern conservatism. It wasn't until Fox News was up and running that we started to see permanent changes in the electorate. And this graph that you see shows exactly what's happened, shows who Fox's viewership has increased from just above 0 in 1998 to 2.5 million in 2018. That was 3 years ago. This month, over 3 million viewers have tuned into Fox News during prime time. So the chart that I use, as I alluded to, is from July 6, 1775. I came to this chart from my friend Ariel Gutman, who had collaborated with Jim Lewis, who was the realizer of astrocartography. And Ariel told me that Jim believed that this was the actual true chart of the United States. And I don't want to get into any philosophical arguments because, astrology works, so I believe all astrology works. I don't think that one chart is definitely better than the other, but I have found some amazing correlations in this chart and amazing expressions and explanations of the American personality, if we can call it that, or cultural behavior through this chart. The correlation, the history behind it is that late in the morning of that day on July 6, 1775, the Second Continental Congress passed an act to bear arms against Great Britain. And that legislative act by default severed all economic and political connections to our mother country. Well, when a colony, declares war against its mother country, it ceases to be a colony. I mean, it's a given fact. The skirmishes with the British Redcoats at Lexington and Concord were defensive actions, but now they had hired George Washington to lead a standing army, which was an act that was passed the day before, and they adopted an offensive stance. They were no longer colonies of England. So this is all, it's all on record. It's all in the National Archives, the Journal of the Continental Congress, 1774 to 1776. You can look it up. This is the actual quote of that act, that in our own native land, in defense of the freedom that is our birthright, and which we have enjoyed until to the late violation of it for the protection of our property, we have taken up arms. My perspective on the July 4th charts is that it was our country's first birthday. We had survived a year of warfare with the most powerful military force on the planet, and we finally had the cojones to say we are an independent country. But it really happened by default a year earlier. It's important to recognize, though, that whatever chart we look at, these outer planets move very slowly. The orbs are 8 and 9 years long from their ingress, from their inception to the point in which they go out of orb. So they really only differ by about a year in terms of their perfections. I mean, we're looking at 2020 versus 2021 or 2022, but this has been going on, really for the past 7 or 8 years. And I'm gonna kind of walk us through some of those years as well as we move past. What really grabs me about this chart are several things. With Saturn at conjunct Mars on the ascendant, I mean, we have always been out there as the world's police force. We think that we are the authority. We have aggressively exercised our power in the world in order to advance our own agenda and our own beliefs. Mars conjunct Neptune in the 12th house. Can you tell me that our history is not loaded with backroom deals and subterfuge and things going on behind the scenes? We're still dealing with it. Very, very little is transparent. If we had transparency, a lot of our history would be different. And Jupiter conjunct Uranus up in the 9th house, well, hello. I mean, if that's not a perfect, example of the expression of our beliefs and our philosophy and the way that we have pushed it out into the world, but much of the outer planets are really all in the same place in all these charts. They only differ by a degree. It's just the house that they're in. But at any rate, I'm going to walk through this and we'll see how some of this is playing out. So today I want to look at what I'm seeing as the greatest test of the rule of the law in our history. We have to remember that our country began as a social experiment. It was the first time in history that we know of, and I think we could go back, to some of the prehistory that's being revealed. But in terms of recorded history, going back maybe to the middle 6,000 years ago to Mesopotamia, we were the first government that was ruled by the governed, by the people of the people. It's unprecedented in recorded history. We are still a social experiment. That experiment is still unfolding. And there's an inconvenient truth regarding the US Constitution. Yes, it's a magnificent document, but it was written to protect property rights. There was nothing in the original document that protected human rights. It's only in the last 75 years that anything has been enacted or added to the Constitution to protect you and me, not our house, not our money, not our business, not our, and it's gotten worse because since Citizens United, the Supreme Court ruling, corporations are now people. It's actually become codified that property rights are really what it's about. Most of us were born in a post-World War II bubble or soon after. We don't know what it was like 100 years ago, but it wasn't like things are today. It's only in the past 75 years or so that we've actually seen any advancement. And it's, I'm going to say exactly what Kim just said. It's been a one step forward, 2 steps back for the entire 250 years. We're make some progressive advances, but then fall back. Our founding fathers meant well, but they were conditioned by their time, just as we are. Some of them were slave owners, because the economy of growing cotton was all manual labor. Even when the cotton gin was invented, the increased production reinforced the need for slaves. The South required cheap labor in order to prosper. When we look at the Neptune opposition, and I'm jumping ahead of the story, that occurred in the 1850s. It's what led up to the Civil War. Slavery did not end with the Civil War. It just became segregation. The truth is that racism, xenophobia, and misogyny came over in the Mayflower. They burned women as witches. If they didn't like the way they dressed, they got burned as a witch. Our times are a self-fulfilled prophecy. The South promised it would rise again, and it did on the Capitol steps and in the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. Okay, we've lived through this. And the current US Pluto return is underscored with that US Neptune opposition, which last occurred in the years leading up to the Civil War. And I'm going to examine the current charts to the US chart, and particularly the transits to Mercury, which is the ruler of the ninth house in this chart, that correlates to the judicial system in our body of laws, and to Jupiter, which is the ruler of the third house, correlating to the media. And Jupiter happens to reside in that ninth house, and it rules the third house as well. So you can see here the areas of the chart that I'm going to look at as we move through this talk. Excuse me. So this is the chart for January 6th of this year, which was when the US Capitol riot. And you can see the stresses here. Saturn is trining Jupiter and Uranus. Pluto in conjuncts the lunar north node and US Venus, which is the ruler of the chart. Eris is squaring US Pluto. Eris is trining US Eris, and Neptune opposes Neptune, squaring the lunar nodes. And I'm going to unpack all of these dynamics as we move through the next couple of slides. But this is the undercurrent of exactly what we're experiencing this year. So the question that I get asked by people, by clients that I run into, they ask me, what the hell is going on? Okay, what is it that's going on that's causing all of this turmoil and chaos? Well, if you've heard any of my talks in the past couple of years, you know that I have offered the Pluto-Eris combination as the primary causal factor of everything that has rocked our world for the past decade. This last quarter square, and this is the solar fire readout just for the transits from Pluto and Eris, has not occurred in 2,700 years. It was the axial age, which is a term coined by German philosopher Karl Jaspers. In those years, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Plato, Homer, Elijah, and Isaiah were all on the planet. The great thought streams of Western civilization came onto the planet in that time. This is the nature of what we're passing through. Eris is the goddess of chaos and discord, and she's inculpated, she's blamed for the start of the Trojan War. And the Trojan War, was brutal. At the end of the Trojan War, read the Odyssey, Odysseus goes down into the underground. Hermes led all of the heroes down into the underworld, and Odysseus visits them in the Odyssey. But a little known fact was that at the end of the Trojan War, Aeneas, who was a Trojan royal, and if you've studied any mythology, you've heard the name Aeneas. Virgil wrote the Aeneid about him, sailed to Italy, and he founded the Roman Empire. That was a culture that lasted 1,000 years, and its influences still imprint our modern world. So this is how I view Eris. Yes, she's highly disruptive, but she brings to resolution those crises, those situations which have found no other outlet for resolution. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but bitter pill is the one that heals us. You can see here, this is the range of this transit. It first came into orb in 2017. It's going to last through 2024. Not coincidentally, it coincides with Pluto's ingress into Aquarius. So these are the transits of Eris to the US Pluto. Okay. Now, since Pluto, transiting Pluto is conjunct US Pluto, the two planets are also currently in square aspect. The difference, though, is that transiting Pluto is going to move on and ingress Aquarius in 2024 and move out of orb with Eris. But US Pluto is not going to move. Eris has a 500-year orbit, and she's especially happy in her brother Eris's, in Aries sign. She spends over 120 years out of 500 years of that orbit in the single sign of Aries. Which means that she moves over each individual point in Aries 4 times. in her annual retrograde. It takes her 4 years to clear a single point in Aries. So she's not going to move out of orb with US Pluto until 2052. So we're getting this Pluto-Eris combination from two different directions. It's quite intense. I've eliminated all the some of the ingresses and going in and out of orb, but this began in 2004 and it's going to go till 2052. It's the really the foundation. I see the astrological foundation of the time that we're passing through. Just as a little bit of backstory with Eris. Eris entered Aries in 1927. She also, because of the nature of her elliptical orbit, Uranus, two cycles of Uranus fit into one cycle in Aries with Eris. Uranus immediately conjoined Eris a couple years later. We had the Great Depression, we had World War II and the rise of fascism. And then Uranus and Eris came back together again in 2015 and in 2016. We got Donald Trump, and in 2020, we got COVID. This is really what's really rocking our boat. These are the dates of the 3 Pluto returns as I see them, and I've correlated them to this year's events. The Capitol riot occurred only 6 weeks after the first Pluto return. And it also needs to be mentioned that they moved into orb, that Pluto and Eris actually moved into orb at the first week in January. And we also had Eris stationing direct the first week in January. Eris makes one annual retrograde like all the other outer planets, and they've all been in January and July. So every July, Eris retrogrades. Every January, Eris goes direct again. Well, on January the 10th, I believe, I don't have the date in front of me, Eris turned retrograde. So this is what was happening at the Capitol riot. We had the first Pluto return according to this chart, and we also had Eris stationing direct again. The second Pluto return, it was on July 1st, July 1st, and on July 6th, on July 10th, the January 6th commission was established. So we can see a pattern here of this outrage and this discord just unfolding right along the line of these returns. The third Pluto return is going to be on Christmas Day this year. And at the end of this talk, I have the Christmas chart, this third Pluto return, and Donald Trump's chart. We're gonna look at that. And again, here are the dates of the Pluto returns. So these are the transits to Mercury and Jupiter of the US chart from the start of this year through next year. And you can see that we've got the Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus pressuring Mercury. We have Jupiter and the lunar nodes pressuring Venus, which is the ruler of the chart. And we have the lunar nodes in Jupiter pressuring Jupiter, which is, is our media and is also the judicial system. Jupiter, is active in both of these areas of the chart, both the press and our judicial system. And then we have Jupiter opposite Saturn. So we're seeing disruptions and interruptions and restrictions and pressure to the due process of the law. The law is misapplied and misused by those in authority. The function of Uranus and Aquarius in the chart is the disruption and interruption of the crystallization that occurs in Capricorn. It shakes things up so that something else can be reformed and rebuilt in its place. Something else, we can move on, we can individuate, we can move away from all that consensus conditioning that we've picked up, across our lifetime, and actually, find our own true self. There are increased evolutionary pressures to proactively alter the judicial system and to extend protection of human rights, but it's definitely an uphill battle. And the country at large is traumatized, there's no question. and the past and future battle for control of the present. This is a dynamic of the nodes themselves. And legal pressures on the exercise of authority and excessive collective ego, not just in the public sphere, but in the private sphere. I think somewhere in this talk, I probably say this, I don't condone or agree with what happened on January 6th, but I understand it. I understand, these people being, the anguish and the trauma that they're feeling, and needing, they need a savior. They need somebody to, there's something known, there's a savior complex out there. Saviors need to find disciples, but the disciples need to find a savior as well. It works from both sides of the equation, and people need something to hang on to grab onto. In order to find stability and just to find a star to follow, to lead their way. We see here again more pressures. We have the nodes and Jupiter pressuring Uranus, evolutionary stresses that threaten to disrupt the rule of law. And here is the Neptune opposition. This is the extreme political polarity. It's the incongruity between beliefs, between ideas, between what people think, between their truth, between what it is where they find meaning. It's all just meeting in the middle, and in the middle is just a hotbed of anger and fierce confrontation. These are the Pluto returns, and here we see all of these actions on the nodes of the U.S. nodes from Jupiter, and even a nodal square to the U.S. nodes that occurs through this year and into next year. These are evolutionary pressures. They're creating crises that are compelling growth. They're compelling our evolution to move forward. So Pluto is evolutionary transformation. I think we all agree to that. And Saturn and Capricorn are form and structure. Change is the only constant. Okay. At the last transit of Pluto to 26 degrees, a new nation was born. And the founding principles stated that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed with their creator with certain unalienable rights. And these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. This entire process is on the table once more. And like I said, though I don't agree or condone the actions of those people who stormed the Capitol, I understand their angst. Our country has not lived up to its self-stated intentions. As of Q1 of 2021, the top 10% held 69.8% of the total US net worth, and the top 1% held about half of that wealth. The bottom 50% of US residents only hold 2% of all US wealth. As recently as 2011, that number was as low as 0.4%. Trillions of dollars are spent to send millionaires into space, while 500 million people in the United States are homeless. Over 30 million people have no health care. Militarized police take their frustrations out on people of color and ethnicity. And for far too many people, the American dream has turned into a nightmare. So what can we expect in December? Donald Trump is not going away, okay? Pluto inconjuncts his Mars, Jupiter opposes his Mars. We're all too aware of his penchant for violence and revenge. What crisis will he create to further his own interests? Eris squares his Saturn. This is a frightening implication of his need to exercise his authority. Pluto opposes his Venus conjunct Saturn in Cancer. What are his essential priorities? His own safety. Saturn opposes his Pluto. Will the weight of our body of law compel even more illegality? Neptune squares his lunar nodes. Will he descend into even deeper states of delusion? Nothing he has done or said makes me believe that he will allow himself to be prosecuted. Will the pending litigations make him a martyr? A martyr has much more influence and power than a savior. Will he flee the country to avoid prosecution? Will there be another riot or other public insurgency? There's another elephant in the room. We go to the supermarket and there are holes on the shelves where our favorite products used to be. We tell ourselves, well, they'll have some next week, but then they don't. Our parents and grandparents lived through the shortages and rationing of the Depression and World War II. Are we prepared for that eventuality should it come to pass? The United States has always been a social experiment. 11th house US Venus conjunct the lunar north node correlates to the highest ideals of freedom and equality. The inconjunct from Pluto catalyzed a crisis-driven course change. Evolutionary crisis is driving that experiment forward. The Neptune opposition generates the philosophical and ethical tug of war. Historically, the country has always taken 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Right now, we seem to be stuck somewhere in the middle. Pluto will enter Aquarius in 2024. The dynamics of Uranus are unexpected and traumatic. The generated events create objectivity, blowing away what we think we know. This is the nature of what we can expect over the next few years. I'm often reminded of the message that came to us from the Hopi elders at the onset of this century. Please take a moment to read this silently to yourselves. Thank you so much for listening to my rant. Peace, well-being, and safety. Namaste.